Welcome to Making an Impact. I'm Katie Mills, the head of Zygo Power at Schneider Electric. And in this podcast, we meet incredible individuals from a range of industries to discuss the exciting projects they're involved with today, their career journey today, and ultimately what impact their work is having on the world. In this episode, we're making an impact with Alessandro Di Trapani, co-founder and CEO of Grub Club, and how his journey started with exploring new and more sustainable solutions to the environmental impacts of the pet food industry. We're hearing about the shift towards more sustainable practices in pet food decarbonisation, and it's aimed to reduce environmental impact in what we give our pets. So welcome, Ale, to Making an Impact.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So Grub Club.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What is it?
So Grub Club is a new way of doing pet food. We essentially create pet food that replaces the traditional sources of protein that you'd find in traditional pet food like beef, chicken, lamb, salmon, with insect protein. So it's essentially, the way we describe it is it's the most sustainable way to feed your pet superfood nutrition in the most sustainable way.
And give me the kind of stats around the protein. How much better is it than chicken or pork or beef or whatever?
Yeah, so insect farming or that industry is still really new. But what's really exciting about it is insects can really address lots of the issues across our global food systems. And pet food is just one application of where insect protein is really exciting. So when you look at it from a nutritional perspective, you compare insects, and in our specific case, it's the black soldier fly larvae. Specific type of insect, we use the larvae. From a protein, when you think about protein, it's up to double the protein than beef, for example. Omega levels similar to salmon, or even higher than salmon. More iron than spinach. So from a micro and macronutrient perspective, really comparable to meat and fish. But then when you think about it from a sustainability perspective, or the efficiency with which we can farm and get these nutrients from the grubs, you can grow a ton of insects in 2 weeks using a land area of around 20 square meters, so probably around the size of this room, and less than 30 liters of water. Whereas if you were doing the same with livestock, especially in an ethical way, you'd need a lot more resources and a lot more time. So insects are really exciting, technology that we can use to address some of the issues in our global food systems, especially as our human population, as well as our furry friends that come with it. As that grows, the demand for protein especially is growing, and we only have so much land to use, and we already use a lot of that for animal agriculture. So yeah, it's a really exciting technology.
So it's a far more sustainable supply chain, I'm guessing, right? From a farming perspective and everything else.
Yes. And again, it is kind of in its nascency. So, traditional livestock's benefited from decades of scale, government support, subsidies, and grants. And insects are kind of very early on in that journey. So there's a lot of work to be done to make it better and to integrate insects into our existing supply chains. So currently, a lot of the insect farms will feed the grubs on pre-consumer waste. A big part of what goes into insect farming is the byproducts from brewing beer. So spent grains from the brewing industry those grains will get fed to the insects. They will upcycle that waste into a really high quality source of nutrition. And then that goes back into the food system through applications like ours. And what's really exciting as well is the insect waste, or the frass as it's called, is also a really promising biofertilizer. So essentially creating this closed loop ecosystem or food system, which is, we're really excited about it, and I could nerd out about.
No, I love it. It's a real circular approach, right?
Exactly. That's the
everyone
word,
keeps
circular.
saying we're striving to, circularity and a circular economy, which is difficult to do in very traditional, I suppose, places across our economy. But from this perspective, pretty new, which means easier to change things, do things differently.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a real kind of circularity element to it, which is great.
Exactly. And that same ton of insects that I spoke about earlier, for example, that could process around 4.5 tons of waste. So, and again, the word waste is typically has a negative connotation to it, but here we're thinking, think about unused fruits and vegetables, those grains spent grains coming from the brewing industry. So it's all very highly regulated sources of waste product that would otherwise not be used or kind of just go into composting or inefficient methods of waste management. Whereas here, these insects are really efficient little upcyclers. They grow 10,000 times their weight in 2 weeks, which is pretty fascinating, and are kind of at the point at which they're then kind of harvested or then used in our process. They've consumed all the nutrients that they would need, so they're really nutrient dense, which is why they're such an incredible kind of potential ingredient in fish feed, animal feed, pet food, and potentially even have their role to play in forms of human nutrition as well.
Yeah. So where did this come from? Where did this idea come from? You didn't wake up one day and think, I know, insects for I'm going to feed them to my dog.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? What's your background? Tell us a bit about you.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit about my journey, and then that will kind of lay a nice platform to talk about how Grub Club came about. I certainly I'm not from a pet food background at all, so I've learned a lot in the last few years about pet food. I've always loved dogs. I've always had dogs growing up, but my background was traditionally in finance. Spent a little bit of time in consulting, but a big chunk of my early career was in commodity trading, focusing on soft commodities, so agricultural commodities from grains, oil seeds, tea, coffee, things like that. And then spent 2 years before moving to the UK between Kenya and South Africa, where I was working on a kind of corporate back venture, which was a agri-tech startup, essentially serving the smallholder farmers of East Africa. So quick segue into that. It's a supply chain that's really, it's not very transparent. It's quite broken. The smallholder farmers, which are an integral part of the kind of agricultural value chain in Africa, especially in East Africa, they are the ones that kind of get the raw deal. So think of the same kind of mission that Tony's Chocolonely is on to kind of fix the cocoa value chain. We were essentially trying to do something very, very similar in that value chain in Africa. And I guess that kind of opened my eyes to business outside of the finance function, outside of the numbers, which I found really interesting. And that was kind of the perfect opportunity and timing for me in my personal and professional life to pursue an MBA at London Business School. So I moved to the UK, spent 2 years at LBS, and LBS was kind of the place where Grub Club was born. And it was actually a classmate of mine who was looking at the potential for insect protein in pet food. And I was actually doing an internship with AB InBev during the summer. It was all kind of during COVID. It was all virtual. And for a number of different reasons, didn't get a full-time offer for AB InBev for after the MBA. So I was kind of thinking about my options and thinking about what to do. And found it really interesting what these guys were working on in terms of insect protein, and it all kind of stemmed from an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, of a woman in the United States saying she wanted to explore what the beyond meat of pet food could look like, which is really interesting because this was certainly at a time where the rise of oat milks and not the best case study to look at now, but the Beyond Meats and the Impossible Burgers and all of these different alternatives to traditional protein sources, dairy, etc. And it was interesting because no one had really thought about that in the pet food context. So started to dive into what that could look like. Looked at a number of different things, whether it was plant-based, and we decided not to go with plant-based for a couple different reasons. One, the veterinary backing wasn't quite there for a vegan diet for dogs and cats. Certainly for cats who are obligate carnivores. So cats require a source of meat or certain amino acid profile in their diet, which they can't really get from a plant-based diet. So that kind of ruled out plant-based. We were then thinking about lab-grown meat or cultured meat, and that was just, the economics just didn't stack up. It felt like even 20 years down the line, perhaps there wasn't a path to the economics working and creating a product that would be viable from a cost perspective. And then we looked at insects, which were exciting for a number of reasons. We've covered the sustainability side of things, which is amazing. So that's a huge tick in that box. We touched on briefly the nutritional side of things. So, obviously working with the vets and nutritionists that we have kind of consulting with us and within our team, the sustainability benefits are great, but it needs to stack up from a nutritional perspective. No dog owner will feed their dog something that's not going to be at least equally or superior from a nutritional perspective. So that was super encouraging, seeing the levels of protein, the omega-3s, the profile from a nutritional perspective was really promising. And finally, the supply chain was gathering a lot of momentum. So lots of investment going in upstream, which is of course encouraging for us because we didn't want to spend a lot of time and resource building a business and then not be able to scale because the supply wasn't there. So it seemed like a bit of a perfect storm, but on the flip side, it also seemed like the hardest one to communicate. I feel as though it would be a lot easier to communicate a vegan product to humans or dog owners because they kind of see it on shelf and they see so much of it every day in supermarkets, or everyone knows a vegan or a vegetarian or flexitarian. So it seems less of a leap from a cognitive standpoint. Lab grown, equally kind of strange, but kind of people can get around it. But insects, quite foreign, at least in the Western world. We tend to forget that there's billions of people globally that insects form a part of their diet. So it's not that foreign to a lot of our human population, but at least in a market like the UK, it's still pretty new. So we knew, yes, it seems great and everything stacks up, but we've got our work cut out when it comes to educating customers about this exciting new category.
So how have you gone about that education piece?
It's been tough. I mean, certainly, the way I like to see it, and this isn't really diving into much of what we've done, and which I'll get into, but it is quite intuitive, right? I mean, initially it will be really a shock to a lot of people or quite interesting, but a few minutes of basic research and an open mind will show you like, wow, this is really interesting. I could get around this. I could think about this. Not to say there's been, small pockets of the internet that have come at us pretty hard, but that's normal. That's expected. But I think what we've really doubled down on is focusing on the benefits of insects. I think sustainability has become, while it's such a key part of our mission and our vision as a business, and it was, one of the main reasons we came to be was the sustainability mission that we were on. But that's become a kind of secondary layer of our communication. We dial into the product benefits, the benefits that insect protein can provide to your dog. So, a big part of why customers come to us is their dog has a dietary intolerance or sensitivity to traditional sources of protein. So you'll hear a lot of people describe their dog as allergic to chicken or allergic to beef, things like that. So dogs will sometimes then develop these intolerances to their food. And insects, given that they're a novel protein source, so a new protein source for dogs, they haven't developed these intolerances to insects. So we have a lot of customers that will come to us. They've been at their vet. They've tried a kind of prescription diet, as it's known. Haven't really seen results. Their dog's itching, scratching, has a bit of digestive trouble, and they'll make a switch to a novel protein diet like insect and see amazing results. Lots of, it presents often as hair loss or fur loss, lots of scratching, ear issues, ear infections, and within 6 to 12 weeks, pet owners see an amazing improvement in their dog's health. So we really dial into like those benefits, the benefits to your dog's gut and the probiotic, properties of insects and all of that. So really focusing on that, and then using sustainability as a secondary layer of communication to show people, you've now made the switch. This is the impact you've had. This is, it really comes as a really feel good factor. And of course, sustainability's been amazing for us in terms of our B2B discussions, because so many, retailers out there, or whoever it may be, stakeholders in the value chain, are trying to be more responsible about their procurement, about their own practices, and trying to take steps towards making the industry more sustainable. So that obviously works really well for us there. But certainly, we've still got loads more work to do. And we've tried to also be as transparent as we can. I've been fortunate enough to see a few insect farms, and it's amazing because it was just like loads of people walking around in lab coats, hair nets. It's really clean. It's like, it's a fascinating operation. And, I it might be a bit controversial saying this, but it's probably a lot more, like a lot cleaner of a place than a lot of pig farms or cow farms or chicken farms, right? So we're trying our best to lift the veil on insect farming, because I think it's natural. We try and remind ourselves that we can't take it for granted, because we work on an insect-based dog food every single day, and it's like something we live and breathe as a team. We can't take for granted that like a lot of people haven't heard of it, and that's not a problem. But we have to then do the work to kind of bring them on that journey with us, and show people that look at how great it is. Look at the, from a sustainability, nutrition point of view, can be a great alternative. And we've also tried to do our best not to alienate or bash any other types of diet, because it's kind of the same way you wouldn't go and tap someone on the shoulder and tell them how to feed their child. And it is in essence the same thing.
I have a dog and a child.
Yeah,
so
there you go, right?
Is.
So you probably wouldn't take too kindly to me telling you how to feed either of those two beings. But what we always say is we want to give people all the information that they have to make an informed decision based on what they feel is best for themselves and their pet, or their child, or in this instance, their pet. So it's hard work, but thankfully we're seeing great results from our customers, and the people that do drink the Kool-Aid drink it in a massive way. And it really is amazing to see some of the results that we've helped, so many dogs out there. There's one specific instance that I'll never forget, was Sharpei, whose owner reached out to us and said this was literally the last thing that we we're going to try, or it was going to be putting our dog down, because of how bad she was suffering from these lesions on her skin, and anything she ate, she was just having these reactions to, and she was like a new dog. So I was just like, that's amazing. So yeah.
You saved the dog's life right
there.
There we go.
Claim to fame.
Not just feeding them, but saving them too. Do you need help calculating and tracking your carbon emissions? Use Zygo Activate decarbonisation software to calculate Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, track your progress, and reduce your carbon footprint. Search Zygo Activate and request your free demo today. Your point around kind of other organisations and their views on sustainability and how things are shifting. We're seeing intense regulation coming in, I would say, across Europe, especially. I know the UK is technically different, but I would have thought would probably follow in the near future. So when we look at regulation like CSRD, surely when you think about that supermarket supply chain, for example, where hopefully your products will be sold, that must be a positive thing for as a business to see that kind of regulation coming in, I would have thought.
I mean, absolutely. Like, selfishly, when we look at it from our business perspective, and what it could mean for us in our growth and our distribution, absolutely. The more people are thinking about sustainability and taking steps towards improving every element of their supply chain or their business operations, for us that's really great, because we can put our hands up and say, stocking us in the example you mentioned is an opportunity for you to make more of the products on your shelf a sustainable choice, and ultimately will help the UK public to have access to those products across more shelves. So it's obviously encouraging for us, but broadly speaking, I think it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
We need to be making these changes, and um, it's tough because I think lip service only goes so far, and the data speaks for itself. So we do need to actually make actionable changes. We can't just speak to the things we want to do or need to do. It's kind of time that we pull the trigger on a few things. So yeah, it's really encouraging to see the steps being taken, but I think so much more needs to be done.
Yeah. And I think what is always really important to remember, because you'll hear a lot of complaints about new regulation coming in, right? Oh, it's going to make things more expensive for organizations or whatever. But actually what we forget is it also creates new opportunity for organizations like yourself, right? For smaller companies that are just starting, even new industries of the future, the kind of opportunities that we maybe haven't even thought about yet. Will be created because of this, more intense focus on all things sustainability. So that could only be a good thing, is the point.
Yeah, agreed.
So tell me a little bit about the future of Grub Club. Sorry, I will get it right on this, I promise. It's
You're
the
not
tongue
the first
twister.
one. You're not the first one.
Tell me about the future of Grub Club.
I mean, yeah, it's 2024 was an amazing year for us. We unlocked some new distribution. We released some new products. We launched our first TV ad, which was really exciting. Compliments of Sky and their Zero Footprint Fund. But I think the future for us, we've got a lot more work to do around expanding our product range. So we want to serve more segments of that pet food market. So we want to expand our range within the dog food side of things, different formats, wet food, potentially fresh, all while staying true to our mission and our vision as a business to provide that superfood nutrition in the most sustainable way. So we'll probably avoid kind of things where we need cold transport and things like that, and try and make sure we can provide this kind of sustainable nutrition solution. So expanding our range and then expanding our distribution, being more accessible. So, affordable, accessible, and available. We need to be on more shelves. So we're really focused on getting into more retailers, building up more partnerships, working with those retailers to educate customers, because once we get on shelf, that work educating, like we discussed earlier, doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the immediate focus areas for us. But I would say, yeah, the future for us, or my goal, is to be the obvious choice for pet owners. And what does that mean? It means that once someone has a think about feeding their dog an insect protein based diet, they're just like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I? So the gap between where we are now and there is pretty big.
Yeah.
But it's quite exciting thinking about all the things we need to do to get there. So the next few years will just be closing that gap, basically.
Yeah. And look, I think when you look back over the years, I have parents of a very older generation. My parents are in their 80s. And if you'd have told them in their 20s some of the stuff that we do nowadays, they'd have gone, never in a million years.
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea of, having pet food insect pet food, it's really not that far off, realistically.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we always joke, we used to go to dinner parties and stuff. Hugh, my co-founder, and I would go out together to wherever it was, and we'd be chatting to people. And, naturally you meet someone and the conversation will end up being, what do you do for a living, or something like that? And you tell someone, yeah, we're working on this new concept that we're going to be feeding dogs with insect protein. And most people thought that we were smoking something, whereas now, which is also encouraging, even just at like a surface level observation that we have is, now when we mention it to someone who's not heard about it or doesn't know us, that piques their interest. They're like, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more. They want to learn more. It's less so like this skepticism. It's more just interest and intrigue, which I think is really encouraging.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. To be fair, I have a small sausage dog.
Nice.
He's getting on a bit now. He's 9. If Grub Club could help stop him yapping, that would be really great all day, every day.
Sausage dog, I don't know if that's gonna happen.
It's definitely not possible. But yeah, I remember the first time we spoke, and I straight away I thought, oh, hang on, this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
As a dog who has a very sensitive stomach and always has done. I was like, oh, this could be quite interesting. So yeah, I can totally see more and more people going the Grub Club route in the future, 100%. Because our pets are our babies too, right?
Yeah.
So
But you see, I think it's got to speak to those pain points you have.
yeah,
You won't, I mean, we're on a podcast right now about sustainability, but you're not going to change your dog's food because it's more sustainable. You're going to change your dog's food because it sorts out, was it a he?
yeah, Gus.
It's going to sort Gus's poops out.
Yeah.
Make them easier to pick up, make your life easier.
Hopefully I don't have to wake up in the middle of the night to let him out to go. Yeah,
exactly.
that would be nice.
Or if he's itching and scratching or his coat's looking dull, it's gonna sort that out.
Yeah.
Or if there's anything else that, there needs to be a clear pain point that it's solving. And that's what we quickly realized when we kind of pivoted away from leading with our sustainability messages.
That's not the pain point right now.
It's got to fix a problem. And I think that for our counterparts who are kind of fighting the good fight, trying to introduce insect-based solutions into the human food chain in different ways and formats, I think that's one of the key challenges is for us as humans. Insects kind of solve a protein problem. I'm vegetarian. I eat a balanced diet that is plants and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas, I wouldn't feel, I'm obviously obsessed about insects. So if there's an opportunity to eat grubs, I'll give it a bash.
Give it a go.
But for a lot of people, there's no real like pain point to then go for insects. Whereas I think where we have and that's where I think the challenge is for the insect protein in a human, because you see these kind of protein bars and protein puffs and things like that made with crickets or other forms of insect, but they haven't quite taken off yet because it's just really another source of protein. It's not like you can't eat beef, so here's an alternative. It's like you can't eat beef. There's a number of different options. But for pets, I think where we've seen why insects are taking off is there are those pain points that insects are a great solution for.
Yeah.
So then there's that real impetus for people to try it out and open their minds to it.
100%. So looking to the future, one of the questions I ask everyone is, what legacy do you want to leave behind? So 100 years from now, your family, whether you have kids and your grandkids, are like, you know what, Uncle Ali, he did that. What is the one thing that you want to leave behind?
I mean, I think this is probably more outside of Grub Club specifically. I think for me, just as a person, I just want to, I obviously am an ambitious guy. I want to take Grub Club to as high as it can be. As I said, want it to be the obvious choice for pet owners. But obviously, we really want to go along that journey in a great way, taking people with us to, we want our team to have a great time doing what we do. We want them to learn and grow and feel a great amount of fulfillment from the day-to-day work. We want to have an impact on dog owners. So I think the legacy, I just want, I want people to remember me just thinking, that was a guy who worked hard toward, in an honest way that tried to make a positive impact, no matter how big or small. Just in your day-to-day, everything you do every day is try and lift others around you up, which I think we try and do. It's sometimes difficult, but yeah, that's kind of how I'd want to be remembered. The legacy I'd want to leave is, a good way of doing business and doing life and bringing others along on a fun journey. And there's a bit of a roundabout way of saying things. Probably a more eloquent way to describe what I said. But
no, I think that's a great legacy to leave behind, right? The world could be just a little bit better than when kind of how I left it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Love that. Well, Ali, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Take care.